Hey everyone, Jared Sandler with you. I am in a hotel room in Houston. The Rangers and Astros later tonight. At the time we are having this conversation, we'll play the second game of their two-game series. I am joined, of course, by former major leaguer, former Texas Ranger, Shawn Tolleson. And we want to turn the clock back and talk about the 2015 Texas Rangers. I'm pretty excited about this. Shawn was on that team. He played a very big role on that team. The lights just went out. That's how excited they are. Now we got the lights back on. But Shawn, I'm pumped to be able to talk about the 2015 season.
Yeah, I'm excited to do it. Some good times in 2015 for sure. It looks
So
like it may be a different hotel room that we stayed in 2015. We were at it was either the Days Inn or the Best Western, so that looks like a little bit nicer than back
we
then.
we are not in the same hotel room from that era. I will tell you that. So 2015 was like will always be a really special year for me. I think that's why I'm so pumped to talk about it. For one, from a team standpoint, the Rangers won the division, and it didn't work out against Toronto, but played in a pretty epic playoff series. And the way the Rangers won the division, coming off a season in which I think we had the third or fourth worst record in baseball, got off to a horrible start, made the big Cole Hamels trade, came back to win the division. The Astros Rangers rivalry was probably at its best in 2015, maybe some carryover into 2016.
Mm-hmm.
So there's all of that. The Josh Hamilton's comeback. I mean, and then for me personally, it was my first year in this role. As a diehard Rangers fan growing up, getting to be a part of the broadcast and for it to be such a special year, it was just a really, really cool year for me. And so even though it didn't end with a World Series, I have a tough time of not smiling when I think of 2015. So, like, immediate reaction when you think of the 2015 Rangers, what comes to mind?
First thing that comes to mind was, man, this is Jared Sandler's first year. That's no, I was listening to I knew you were new at that, but I didn't realize that was your first year.
It's my first year, yeah.
I didn't know that. That was a fun year for you then.
It's
You did a
great.
good job. I listened to some of your post game stuff on my drive home.
Would you really like
Um,
what? See, quick
sometimes I would. It's kind of one of those things. When I pitched good, I would, and when I pitched bad, I wouldn't. So,
how many guys do you think? I know players like I know who from the coaching staff and who from the front office will listen, because we'll have fun dialogue and stuff like that.
yeah.
I like hesitate to even ask if players do. Not that I mean, you know how I go about things. I don't rip guys or anything, but like, you go 0 for 4 and I make a comment, man, like rough night for such and such player. Like that can, there are emotions involved, right? Like, so I would never advise anyone to ever listen. But
I
what
don't think
percentage of players?
I don't think many people listen. I don't think
Okay,
many
good,
players listen to it. Like almost zero. I was probably one of the very few. I think
good.
one of the reasons I listened to it is because I was actually a Ranger fan before I ever played for them. So I was kind of used to just listening to pregame, postgame shows on the radio. Like that was just that was part of my drive already before. But I also had the longest drive home. So
You did have a long drive.
I had to do something. So I had, like a 60-mile drive home every time after the game. So you kept me company.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate you tuning in. All
Yeah.
right, so I want to go from the very beginning. I know that you have some very specific Shawn Tolleson nuances from that season, but I just want to go to spring training. So from 2010 through 2013, the Rangers had very good teams to varying degrees, certainly competitive contenders each year.
Yep.
I think the same expectation was applied to 2014, but then injuries just absolutely wrecked the team more than any year that I can recall in recent Rangers history. And it was just a really bad year. So naturally, I don't know that the expectations for 2015 were as high as they otherwise would be. Maybe that was unfair because of how and why 2014 played itself out. But 2015 spring training, are you guys like looking around each other and like, yeah, we're gonna win this division. Like we're a bunch of badasses. Or was there like the uncertainty that might infiltrate a clubhouse after a year that the team had in 2014?
Yeah. I mean, 2015, I really thought we were going to be pretty hot stuff. For sure. Yeah, 2014, those injuries were crazy, crazy, crazy. But going into 2015, I think most of us had some pretty high expectations going into that year. Just when you considered people being healthy and the amount of talent that we had on that team, um, there was a lot of experience on that team too. Um, yeah, I'd say expectations were pretty high.
Okay, so Jeff Bannister is the manager. It's his first year. Off a bad year, team gets off to a bad start. 8-16 to begin the season, and the bullpen was at the root of some of the issues. You end up playing a huge role in that turnaround. We'll get to that. But like even opening day or the opening series, I think was in Oakland. That was not a good series. Opening home game against the Astros, Ryan Rua gets hurt. I think in like the first inning, Derek Holland gets hurt in the first inning. And it's just like the season couldn't have started a whole lot worse. 8-16 through the first 24 games. So what do you remember thinking at that point? Obviously, there's a lot of baseball left, but did your mindset change at all, or what do you remember about that bad stretch in the beginning?
It's never fun to lose, but it was still so new of a season that I think everyone's kind of mindset was probably the same. At least mine was. I hadn't thrown in the towel at that point or anything like that, but I don't know. I mean, it's easy to sit here now and think, no, yeah, we still had the same hopes and ambitions and dreams for that year. I think definitely our start put a damper on that. I probably most of us questioned a little bit, like, are we still as good as we thought we were going to be? So that was debatable.
Okay, so you have your first save on May 20th. May was a huge month, big turnaround month for the team. It wasn't it wasn't like May and then don't look back, because then June it kind of, it evened itself out. And I mean, heck, when when the team acquired Cole Hamels, team was under 500. So it's not like May it took off from there. But without May, there is no playoffs probably, because that's the month that got everything back going. And my recollection is that you taking over the closing duties from Neftali Feliz was a huge part of it. There are two big keys to me in May. It was stabilizing the bullpen, which came from a closer who was getting the job done in yourself, and then Delino DeShields, who I think was the rookie of the month in May, was the leadoff hitter eventually, and just was like so dynamic. And I remember a big road trip against Cleveland, Boston, and New York, and I think it was in that order. It was a 9-game road trip, 3 games apiece, and I think lost the first and last game, but won the 7 in between, and went 7-2 against 3 really good teams. That turned the whole season around. And I remember Delino being a big part of that. But what do you remember about, I mean, here you are, a Rangers fan growing up, and now you're the closer for your childhood favorite team. From a personal, or like as a professional standpoint, that's a pretty big deal. And the fact that you're having success right away, also probably pretty cool.
It was cool. I mean, it was fun to have that opportunity to close, especially get that first save at Fenway in Boston. But, taking that role away from Neftali was kind of, he was just, I mean, it couldn't have gone better. Going back to me being a Ranger fan, I mean, I watched him close out enormous games, when I was still a Ranger fan. This is like 2010 or 11. And so me and Neftali, we never had these like long engaging conversations, but we were very close on what I'd say like a body language basis. Like we always just kind of got along really well. And so whenever that kind of shift was happening and I was told that, if there was a save opportunity, I was going to close. I wanted to go up to him. It felt like the right thing to do, to go up to him and like kind of like hash it out, just like let him know like, hey man, it's going to be all right. Like I got this for a little while, kind of take the pressure off. And Yeah, I just remember that, like, I was walking up to him and he like knew exactly why I was walking up to him. And he just kind of like nodded his head. He goes, "It's okay, man. You got this," and he just kind of gave me a hug. So that was that was a really cool moment for me. And I think even just that is like brief and small of an interaction as it was, kind of instilled in me some confidence going into doing a job like that. Um, yeah.
You ended up saving 35 games and 37 chances. And, the bullpen went from being a big Achilles heel to a strength, and the addition or the change in position, the change in role for you was a big part of that. Ultimately adding Jake Diekman and Sam Dyson played a pretty big role in that as well. Before we just keep going through the season, what are the things, what are the stories or the things at that point, what's going on? Because I know that, it wasn't just about baseball for you that year.
Yeah, no, it wasn't for me, but um, I'd say most of the season was just cruising through. The season really didn't get hard for me until the very end. Um, and I don't know if you want to skip all the way to that point, but we can if you want to.
Yeah, okay. We can always backtrack as needed, but game 161 against the Angels, you had pitched on the 29th, the 30th, and the 1st. This was going to be your this was going to be your 5th straight day pitching against the Angels, chance to clinch. You had been an absolute horse all year, and Jeff Bannister asked you to come on and just wrap things up and seal the deal for the AL West. Again, 5th straight day pitching. So first of all, was there a conversation like, hey, can you do this? Did you go up and say that you were fine? Or what's the mindset there? What was going
on? Yeah, there was a conversation about it. So they kind of asked me, what do you got left? And I said, I got whatever you need left, kind of one of those conversations. And I remember, I think I ended up pitching 5 days in a row, but I think Dyson may have pitched 5 days in a row too. I'd have to look back, but I'm pretty sure he did. It was probably going back, I think, before the Angels were in town. I think maybe the Tigers were in town. So we were playing the Tigers, but I remember having conversations with Dyson, and him. He's as tough as it gets, and not going to turn down an opportunity to pitch. And so part of me just wanted to kind of match his kind of toughness there too. I was, we were both pitching well, and we were both playing huge parts of the bullpen, as was Diekman and as was Keone Kela as well. We were all pitching a lot at that point. We were all tired. We were all exhausted. We all just kind of wanted to finish the season strong and just say yes to whatever things came up. I don't have a schedule in front of me, but I think we played Tigers and then Angels. We won game 1 against the Angels. I think I pitched that game. I did.
You did.
And then we lost game 2, game 3. We needed one more win to clinch the West. So I think we clinched the West on the last game of the season. But so let's see. After game 1 of that series, that's when kind of life hit me. Whenever I guess it was the morning before that game, my mom and dad called us over to the house with my brother, my sister, all our families.
The morning before which game?
The morning before. It would have been game 2 against the Angels. So this is game 159.
Okay. And so this was you, you pitched in a 1-1 game in the 9th and gave up a run, and the team lost 2-1. So it was the morning of that game.
The morning of that game. Yep. The morning of that game. And that's when, my dad called us over and he kind of shared with us his prognosis, which we didn't really know anything that was going on, but he was diagnosed with 2 forms of stage 4 cancer, adenocarcinoma, which was a colon cancer that he had, and then lymphoma. And it was a bad outlook. They gave him 6 months to live. And so, it was a very emotional morning for me. and my entire family, and we spent, a couple hours together just crying and praying, and then I had to drive to the stadium and, rub some icy hot on my shoulder and try to pitch. But it's a lot of those things. I'm not unique in the fact that, you have to do life and baseball all at the same time. You don't get to choose when things hit you, but there's a lot of players that deal with that, but that's just a side of sports that doesn't get put out there much, is kind of, the players who are handling the stresses of life, balanced with a very intense part of the season where we've really got to win a couple games here. So I pitched that game. I came in, it was a tie game. Was that Martin Perez? I think he may have started that game.
Yeah, in that game, so Jared Weaver started for the Angels, and then it was Martin who pitched really well, gave up one run over good. 7 innings for good guys.
I remember him stepping up and pitching really, really well. But so came in a tie game, gave up a run, so we ended up losing that game. So we've got 2 games left, still need 1 win. Again, show up the next day, pitch 3 days in a row, show up the next day, say, hey, I'm good, kind of put on my tough face, and go up and have another opportunity to pitch again. And who pitched that game? Who started that game? Was that Colby?
The 11-10 game? Yeah, so that was Colby who started. He went up against Hector Santiago, and neither guy pitched beyond the 4th inning. So
that was Colby. And then I remember coming in late in that game, not getting outs again. And, I really don't, it wasn't, I was tired, but I think looking back, it's like when baseball should have been number 1 on my mind to get a job like that done, it just wasn't. So it was a really strange place for me mentally and emotionally. And then we get to 162 and we finally win it. And I think everyone just said, forget the bullpen and we're going to leave Cole Hamels in until his arm falls off.
And he gave up 2 runs in the 1st inning, gave up an Albert Pujols home run.
That's right.
And Garrett Richards was on the mound for the Angels. And he's still pitching, but I always looked at Garrett Richards as a future Cy Young contender. He just could never stay healthy, but he was nasty. And I was so nervous.
Electric stuff.
Yeah. And ended up, Adrian had a home run, I think got us on the board a few innings later, and then ended up, had a big inning, and was it 7-2 or 9-2, whatever it was. And Cole ended up pitching a complete game and was brilliant. But and that, to me, that day was unbelievable. I got to be on the field for the clinch. I was standing there with the grounds crew the day before, and I watched that whole thing unfold, from field level. And then the next day to get the clinch. And I do remember thinking, I don't think we had the relationship then that we do now. I would consider you in 2015 a good dude who I could always go and, talk to, whatever. I consider you a friend now.
Yeah, for sure.
But I remember thinking, I'm so glad for you and Ross Ollendorf, because Ross came in after you the day before, and he didn't do well either.
That's right.
I just I remember being so happy that it got done, and you can just forget about it, and it's all the same, right?
Yep. It made it a lot easier to forget about those bad outings for sure when you win. Because when you win, you win. And at that point, the season's over. Your stats are done, and you get to move into postseason. That was a fun thing for me. That was a fun celebration. It was a kind of a weird thing too, right? Because my dad was, my biggest fan, always had been, and he knew those ushers up there in the family section. He knew their names and their spouses' names and their grandkids' names. So for him not to be there was weird. It was really weird for him to not be there for something like that. But the rest of my family got to be there, so that was pretty neat.
So we got to get to the postseason. I want to talk about the Astros.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to bring up quickly. You mentioned the Tigers series. You pitched in, was it maybe the second game of that series, and it was the first of 5 straight for you. Do you remember how that game ended? We won 7-6, because this to me was one of the most significant plays in the season, and it just never gets talked about.
Who made the play?
Well, so you don't remember?
I don't remember.
So Ian Kinsler was hitting. I'll give you that clue. Does that ring a bell?
No.
Okay. So Tigers were, they were good that year. They weren't great, but they were good. Had a really good lineup with Kinsler and Miguel Cabrera and JD Martinez and Castellanos. Cole started that game, gave up 6 runs in 6 innings. We scored 5 in the first off of Daniel Norris and led 5-2 after 1, but the game was 6-6 through 3. And then we scored a run in the 4th inning to take a 7-6 lead. And there was nothing after that. And then in the top of the 9th, they had, you came on to pitch. You got Alex Avila to begin the inning. And then they had, what was that guy? Tyler Collins had a pinch hit single, and then Anthony Ghost singled. So they had, and their runners at first and third. We were up by 1. Rajai Davis tried to bunt, but popped up to Mitch Moreland. And then Ian Kinsler was up, and he hit a ball. Ian's a right-handed hitter, for those who don't remember. We had Drew Stubbs, who we acquired in the middle of the year.
That's right.
And he specifically was in for speed and defense. And so he had come into center, and Ian hit a ball from our view behind home plate in the booth. Looked like it was going to go up the alley in front of the bullpen and right center, and it was going to be a go-ahead double, and holy smokes. Drew Stubbs didn't have to dive, but out of nowhere, running like light speed, tracked that ball down and like fully extended, made the catch, and that ended the game. And
that's right.
To think that, it took 162 to clinch. I mean, off the bat, that ball looked like a double. I just remember, like, that was such a big play. And okay, now that I bring that up, so you do remember that?
I remember that. It's cool to think about stuff like that when you look back. I mean, here we are, 6 years later or something, and look at a season like that, because like someone like Drew Stubbs was such an unsung hero on teams like that. And you could think that he didn't play a significant role, but then you remember specific plays like that. And the fact that it took us 162 games to win the West that year.
Yeah.
And that's pretty amazing, right? Because had he not been there, had he not been a part of the team, it would have been a completely different outcome for the entire season. We wouldn't be talking right now.
Yeah. It would just, I mean, who knows how that plays out? I mean, it's not maybe fair to guarantee that every game would have been the same, because there's different levels of urgency, but man, that was huge.
Yeah.
So the Astros got off to this great start, and they were the talk of baseball for the first 2 months, because they kind of out of nowhere, it was like their first year of being good after just being the laughing stock of the league. And they had all this young talent, and maybe they were a year ahead of schedule, but like they had legitimately really good players. And then I think I don't think Carlos Correa started the year with them, but he eventually came up and he looked great. But that's where the rivalry really started, because you got 2 teams who were both legitimately competing for the same thing. Like, I guess let's just call a spade a spade. Yeah, the Rangers and Astros are competing for the AL West in 2021, but they're in totally different places, right? In 2015, the upstart Astros, the Rangers, who other than 2014, they kind of had run that division. The personality clashes, you had the Jeff Bannister, AJ Hinch moments, which fired people up. I think there were other moments between the 2 teams, but what do you remember about that rivalry? Because I remember being about as fired up for regular season games between the Rangers and Astros that year as any regular season games that I can recall.
Those games felt different. They did. And players could sit here and tell you that, I show up every day with the same intensity, the same. It's not true, certain teams and certain rivalries have that, and definitely with the Astros, it felt more intense. There was a lot of personality clashes going on, and they were good. I mean, they were really good. They had so much talent, so many guys on their team that could do damage. Especially at Minute Maid, could do damage, and so you really had to. I just remember feeling like this intense amount of focus when I was pitching against them, especially in their park. I don't really know exactly why, but especially when I was pitching at Minute Maid, I just remember feeling this like very intense focus whenever I was pitching. Whenever you play a team in your division, you play them so much that you've got these scouting reports that you've gone over and over and over and over again. It's just been kind of beat over your head. And at that point, especially later in the season, I mean, they know what you're doing and you know what they're doing. And it's kind of like, it's really like we've got the same gun, and we're just going to see who has the better aim right now. And they were really, really fun series. It reminds me this year, it reminds me a little bit of the Dodgers Padres a little bit. Just like in state, in division, both teams really good. You've got the Padres who are kind of like new kids on the block. You got the Dodgers who've owned the division. It feels kind of like that. Seems like there's some personality clashes going on.
And the way those teams go about
fun
too, right? Like the Astros, I mean, I'm saying this with a bias, but the Astros acted like they reinvented baseball.
Yep.
And I think that, and their fans kind of embrace that. And listen, it is what it is. If I was an Astros fan, I would have a different lens. I fully recognize that, but I'm not.
Right.
Those games to me were really, really cool. And you mentioned like them being good. I remember in 2016 thinking, we're in trouble. Like this maybe gonna have to be the wild card. And they actually had like a down year. It was almost like they took a step back before taking steps forward, and maybe they acquired some trash cans to assist or whatever. But I mean, that team was loaded. Do you remember there was a big 4-game series in Arlington? I want to say in August, or maybe it was a 2-game series, but it was a 4-game series in September, where I think we started the series 2 games back and won all 4, and the last 2 beat Keuchel and McCullers, which was really sweet. But like, you remember that series? Because that was sweeping a team as good as the Astros in a 4-game series is not easy.
I remember that. That was huge. That was a really fun series. Might have been the most fun series of the year. I remember that.
Scoring 6 in the first inning off of Keuchel. I think I remember, like, I want to say Colby Rasmus made like some ridiculous throw that kind of screwed things up, or I don't remember, but that was just, and Prince was so good. I think in that game, Prince had 2 home runs, including 1 in the first. How about him? He was rough 2014. The injuries that ultimately ended his career started then. He came over with the idea he was going to be this game-changing bat, and just was never the guy that he was in Milwaukee or Detroit. But 2015 was like a big time bounce back year. He was so good in 2015. What do you remember about Prince? Because I think when you mention his name to Rangers fans at that time, going into that season, it would have been like, Prince, like he's the guy that we got for Ian Kinsler, who's great. But like, man, he was so important that year.
He was really important. And he was important for just reasons that people didn't see on the field too. He was a great teammate, and he showed up. He showed up very consistently every day, which I always appreciated and respected, and honestly learned from him, watching him and some of the other veteran guys kind of go about their business like that. It was cool to see. But yeah, I remember 2015 he was hitting the ball hard again. Really hard. He was making really hard outs. That's what I remember. I just remember a lot of, he'd hit like a screaming liner and it would get caught. And it seemed like it was getting caught like every time at one point in the season in 2015. And he just has that beautiful Prince smile. And he would just like kind of, he gets like one step down the line and then he like smiles and just kind of still got his bat in his hand and rolls back to the dugout. That's what I remember most, is him making really hard outs that year.
Yeah, and he had over 300, ended up with 23 homers. I mean, it was peak Prince, at least in a Rangers uniform. There are a few guys who had turnarounds, and maybe we get to that, but I mean, a big part of that season was Cole Hamels. And the trade at the time was communicated as a trade for the future because the team was under 500. And I think I remember before that trade, I would speak to guys in the front office, and we lost a lot of close games early, and they would communicate like, no, we're better than our record. We're better than, like, I think we have a chance, but like that trade probably is not made if Cole Hamels is a free agent at the end of the year. But while you probably communicated, oh, it's a trade for the future, I know because before the trade was pulled off, they were saying these sorts of things, that was a trade they felt like could end up helping that year. And it absolutely did. I know the media thought on it was that, like, in addition to the actual on-field stuff Cole Hamels brought, and let's not forget Jake Diekman as well, but just making that trade in the clubhouse was like a boost of energy and confidence when you get a guy like that.
It was. Yeah. For us, it didn't feel like a trade for the future at all. We were pretty jazzed up and fired up for the present, and knowing what he could do to help our staff there, our rotation. So we were really excited about it. And I don't think any of us knew how excited to be about Jake Diekman, but after seeing him pitch a few times, I mean, it was like, whoa, this dude is nasty. So that was a huge part of our ability to kind of have a strong bullpen the rest of the season.
And Sam Dyson was acquired right around that time as well.
Yep.
I'm curious if you remember, so the Rangers, I guess it must have been the day. I'm looking up dates here just to confirm. So Cole Hamels was technically acquired on the 31st. Okay. But I think the rumors started circulating the day before. But do you remember what happened a couple of days before that against the Yankees? I'll give you a hint. We scored 5 runs in the bottom of the first inning and took a 5-0 lead. Do you remember what happened afterwards?
Negative.
They scored 11 runs in the second inning and ended up winning 21-5. Do you remember that now?
It doesn't even ring a bell.
Really?
Who knows what I was doing that game.
So with that win or with that loss, we moved to 47-52, right? That's not a record where you're thinking, I'm going to win the division.
Yeah.
And then after that loss, came back and won the next 2 games against the Yankees. And then that's when it really officially turned around with no turning back.
Wow.
And it really did coincide with Hamels, Diekman, Dyson joining the fold. And Sam Dyson got a ground ball every time the ball was put in play. It was unbelievable.
It was unbelievable. It was, watching him pitch was unbelievable. That's the only word I can think of to use.
So there were a couple guys offensively who had turnarounds that year. First of all, Shin-Soo Choo. There's the famous Shin-Soo Choo's wife giving him a pep talk at the All-Star break, and Banny made the decision to take this guy who was an everyday player. I guess context, the Rangers acquire Shin-Soo Choo, gets a lot of money, 2014, plays through an injury that he probably shouldn't have played through, but because he felt like he owed it to the organization, played through it, had a really bad year. So fans' first impression, no bueno. And then I don't know what it was, but didn't get off to a good start that year, to the point where Shin-Soo Choo, after the All-Star break, wasn't an everyday player for a few days. But I guess he had a talk. His wife was like, you gotta you're good, figure this out, whatever. I don't, I wasn't a part of the conversation, but everyone talked about it. And then he was just unbelievable the rest of the way. Do you remember like Shinsu Chu just going off in the second half?
Yeah, I remember that. I remember hearing about the pep talk too. I remember a few other guys were asking for one of those pep talks from Mia. So that was funny.
And then the other guy was Rugi. Rugi had, and unfortunately this became the norm, but Rugi, bad start, and he got sent down. You remember Rugi getting sent down like in the first half?
Yeah, I do.
And then he came back up, and I mean, Rugi was outstanding. I think post All-Star break, he was maybe the I don't know about the best hitter, but like he and Chu were huge reasons. Like I think I'm trying to get for sure here. Yeah, post All-Star break, he had like an 850 OPS and hit 12 homers in 68 games. Like, I don't know what else do you recall about the lineup? Because that's Josh Hamilton and that's Mike Napoli trying to play left field. And I mean, that was like, what a like awesome group of guys.
What are some other names? Read them off to me.
So, okay, let's, I did not realize. I remember Kyle Blanks being on the team. Apparently, he hit 3 home runs. I did
Kyle
not
Blanks,
remember
that. Yeah. Okay.
So Napoli ended up playing 35 games. You had the Josh Hamilton walk-off against I remember this. May 31st, Josh Hamilton hits a walk-off double. Prince Fielder scores from first. It was a day game, a Sunday day game. And it just like the place was rocking. It is to this day the longest I have been on the post-game show, because on weekends, I don't really have an out. I just will kind of go. If there are calls, I'll stay on. We were on for 2 hours because I remember I was going to go home and watch USC play in the like in their regional. And I had to just kind of watch passively while taking all these calls, because big win against the Red Sox, comeback win. Josh Hamilton gets the hit. Earlier that game, Adrian Beltre got hurt. And so Joey Gallo was going to get called up. Like, and what we didn't know at the time was Josh Hamilton got hurt on the double, on the walk-off hit. And
That's
Josh
right.
Hamilton was going to miss. And, I don't know if maybe he did come back. He did come back at some point, but missed the next few months. So you have Adrian getting hurt during the game. Josh, unbeknownst to us at the time, getting hurt, big walk-off win, and then the rumors that Joey Gallo was going to make his major league debut. Like, so, and then that brings Joey into the mix. Joey had that like amazing debut and amazing first 2 games. And then I also remember Chris Jimenez and Bobby Wilson being like a catching duo and just being like a great tandem to kind of take us to the finish line.
They were a great tandem. They were awesome. They just continually fed off of each other. I think that's one of the reasons. I mean, they were so in tune to the scouting reports too. They would sit down and work together on them, study. I mean, they seemed like buddies. It was kind of like the Bash brothers of catching.
I don't mean this disrespectfully to either guy, but it was like 2 backup catchers who like took on more responsibility. And I think I've spoken to each of them, and they've each said that was maybe their favorite years as a big leaguer. Like that, because they both were legitimately like big parts of this. All right. So Toronto playoff series, what you got?
I mean, first 2 games, I mean, incredible feeling, right? To win the first 2 of that series. It almost felt, we almost felt kind of destined to kind of just keep going. I mean, to win the 3rd game and just keep marching through playoffs. I felt like we had some momentum going, and it just kind of came unraveled there. But yeah, I remember the first 2 games. I remember actually, so I ended the season throwing those 5 games in a row. And then we get to, was our first 2 games? Yeah, our first 2 games were in Toronto. but get to Toronto, and Jeff Bannister calls me into his office and is like, hey, I don't know who's going to close. I'm just going to use kind of the hot hand, whatever situation I feel like needs to be used. And it was me and Diekman and Dyson in the room there. Maybe Keone in the room too. I can't quite remember, but of course, I mean, this is playoffs. Everyone's like, yeah, man, sounds good. Whatever we need to do.
And you guys all had a good relationship before you?
Yeah, we did. We had a really good relationship, for sure. But yeah, I remember game 1, game 2, and I remember getting, happy flight is like a common expression in baseball. When you finish a good series. I mean, that was like one of the happiest flights, was back to Texas from Toronto. Like, oh, we're gonna win this in Texas, and then to lose the next 2. And then, game 5 back in Toronto.
So we'll get to that in a second. Do you remember who sat near you on the plane on those flights?
I always kind of sat by the same people.
Well, so your wife Lindley was there, right?
Yep, she was there.
One row in front of you was
you
and Kelly Gavin.
And Kelly.
We didn't know how to react after the game 2 win. We have this phrase that we'll still kind of say to one another to this day, 2 and F and F and O, because I remember Kelly hates truffle oil, and the meal or whatever, I think, had like truffle oil or something, or maybe, I don't remember. But like she's like, I don't care. Like we are up 2-0, and I was like 2 and F and O, and she's like 2 and F and F and O, and like we were just like, I couldn't believe it. I mean, it was because every time Josh Donaldson or Bautista or Encarnacion hit a ball in the air, I was sure it was a home run. Like,
I know.
And that place was loud. Like, I'll never forget Marcus Stroman walking out of the dugout like 50 minutes before first pitch, and that place just went bat-esque crazy. This is like almost an hour before first pitch, and golly, that was incredible. And then I guess downhill from there. But
it was, I mean, that was the most memorable baseball atmosphere I've probably ever played in. It was Rogers Center. That series had played there before, but playoffs were just a totally different animal there. I mean, the people, the fans, they go crazy, and they're locked in the entire game.
Them, right? Like they had not been a playoff team in previous years. They acquired David Price at the deadline. They had just this like that. You always have energy when your team's good, but they had that like, we haven't been here in a while energy that was just palpable.
Yeah, and kind of aggression too.
Yeah.
There's a difference between being excited. I mean, you go to like a game in, I don't know, you go to a game in like LA or Anaheim and a playoff game, those fans are like excited, but they're very like just chill. Very chill. This was like the opposite. This was like going to, I feel like I was like, this is like an NHL arena.
It was intense.
With a baseball field.
So game 5, I don't often like reliving this, but I mean, it really was. And it ultimately set the table for the rivalry in 2016 and the Rugi Punch. But what do you remember about flying back out there for game 5? And I guess just for people who care about these things, Cole Hamill started for the good guys. Marcus Stroman started for the bad guys. And obviously the Blue Jays won that game. Bautista hit the home run. But like, do you remember feeling like the same level of confidence? Like, hey, we got this all good? Or were you a little nervous based on how games 3 and 4 went?
Yeah, I was more nervous. Yeah, based on games 3 and 4. I think they definitely had the momentum in their favor, like heavily in their favor. And the fact that we were going back to Rogers Center, with home court, it was, I mean, not to say that I didn't think we could win, but definitely my confidence was much less than it was in even game 3 or game 4.
So took the lead, Delino, as he had done all year. It seemed like got things going in the first, doubled, and then ended up scoring. And then in the third, Chu hit a home run. They scored in the bottom of the third. So it's 2-1. And then they tie it in the bottom of the sixth. Encarnacion homer to make it 2-2. You remember how we scored in the top of the seventh? Because that to me still is one of the. I got asked the other day after the Javi Baez rundown between home and first, where they.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Yeah. That was crazy.
So I got asked in response to that, what is the craziest run that you have seen scored? Like, and my answer was this. Do you remember what went down?
Yeah, are you talking about the Rugi? When he scored? Yeah. Yeah, I remember it. It's definitely bizarre.
So Rugi singled to begin the inning. He ends up making his way to third. Chu's batting. Russell Martin, after a pitch, throwing it back to the pitcher, hit Chu's bat. And the ball went, wayward, and Rugi heads up, came home and scored. And there was a big debate, like, does it count? What's the, whatever. And that's what led to the batteries being thrown on the field and the bottles being thrown, because Blue Jays fans were absolutely irate. And that's what the game really, from an energy, emotional standpoint, got out of hand with that. That's my recollection.
It got out of hand. Yeah, really got out of hand. That's when the fans became really aggressive at that point. I think that, and I've watched the replays of it, and I see both sides of it. Chu didn't really get out of. He was still standing in the box, but whatever it is, right?
But he's entitled to stand in the box.
Absolutely, he is. But from a bullpen perspective, it wasn't any safer down there than it was on the field. That's for sure. It was crazy. There were people throwing stuff at us. I remember the police officers came down to the bullpen, and the fans were throwing stuff at the police officers, and the police officers ended up leaving, and we're like, no, don't leave. They ended up leaving, and they came back a few minutes later and had the helmets with the face masks on.
The riot gear.
Yeah, the riot gear. And I was like, oh boy, this is gonna be interesting. But it got so bad that as bullpen pitchers, we had to stay ready and throw. We had guys that needed to get up and throw. I mean, it's the seventh inning, so this is kind of prime time for the bullpen. And I remember going into the concourse and playing catch, and going into the batting cage and playing catch, because I did not want to go play catch in the bullpen, because we were exposed to whatever the fans were going to throw at you.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was wild.
In the bottom of the inning, that's when Bautista hit the home run. I'll be honest with you, Shawn. I again, as a Rangers fan, that moment ticked me off. I think in hindsight, I don't like Jose Bautista at all, but the guy just hit this huge home run in front of this unbelievable environment.
Yeah.
I don't know, if he said something to Sam Dyson, because that to me is where it's you can celebrate your own achievement, but unless that was the case, and I don't think he did, I think, Sam, just like Jose was excited, Sam's upset. He just gave up this home run in this big moment, but I don't think Jose Bautista did anything wrong. I don't know if you have a different perspective. I hate to admit that that's how I feel, but that was an unbelievable environment. And I guess I just have a tough time blaming the guy for getting super fired up.
I mean, if that were to happen today, no, it wouldn't even be a conversation anymore. Right. Because that's the way baseball's played. There's a lot of that going on. So, back then, there was a little bit more, I don't know. There were more unwritten rules of the game, what you do and you don't do. And so from that aspect, it was disrespectful at the time. But if that were done today, no one would even, it wouldn't even be a conversation. I've been seeing some of these highlights of high school kids and college games and
celebrating.
So, I mean, it is really funny actually to watch. I mean, I don't love it, but I think it is what it is at this point, and you just got to kind of live with it. It's just part of the game. So might as well have fun with it than to get bad about it. But I could side with you pretty easily, especially had I not been a part of it. I'd probably be totally on your side. But being a part of it, like, just was a little bit of a gut punch for sure.
I mean, I still have nightmares of that moment, but that was the loudest single event that I recall a baseball game. I've never heard a place louder than that. At that moment, it was unbelievable.
Yeah, almost hurt your ears kind of loud.
And then the other thing in that inning, Elvis had maybe the worst half inning of his career from like a defensive standpoint, errors. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget, Toronto, I think, is the only airport where we actually have to go through like in-airport security, right? Mm-hmm. We usually just go through like a separate security and go right to the plane. And I was in line. I think Elvis was behind me and Sam was in front of me. Like the two, I hate to say culprits, but the two guys at the center of the comeback for Toronto from a Rangers standpoint. I was sandwiched in between. I just remember being fascinated. I was like depressed at like the outcome. Like I was fascinated as to like what it looked like when a team lost the deciding game of a playoff series and like the plane ride back. And my memory is that it was like somber and silent at first. And then midway through the long flight, there's this realization like, hey, this is the last time we're all going to be together amongst like you guys. And, there's a little more like, no one's celebrating, but it's like, let's enjoy our last hour and a half together or whatever. And it was, I don't know, that's my memory of it. Again, I was so like bummed out that maybe I'm misremembering, but like, I don't know. It was just really interesting and cool to see. And I'm not happy that Elvis was like clearly upset, but like, it was also fascinating to see the guy who, fair or unfair, people would have pointed to as not the GOAT in the good way, but the GOAT in the bad way. And like, he was genuinely like, you could tell he was like heartbroken, and this is like the joyous Elvis who doesn't seem like anything ever really bothers him. And then there's Sam Dyson, who's like the most stoic person ever at all times. And it's just, I don't know, it was really interesting for me. I'm sure interesting is not the word you would use to describe that flight home. But I don't know. What do you remember about that, the end of the season?
Yeah, I remember the flight home being a little bit, this is also it was also my first experience on being, losing a deciding game in a playoff series and flying home. I thought it was a little bit less somber than I would have expected.
Interesting. Okay.
Less somber. And I'm not that that's wrong in some ways. I think it's a positive thing. I think it means that guys can easily move past. In baseball, you've got to be able to have a short-term memory because you've got to get out there and do something the next day. But it was really obvious, like you said initially, right? The bus ride from Rogers Center to the airport, that was as somber as it gets, and then guys do realize that baseball, the best part about baseball are the people. The game is great. You love the game, but at least for me, like, it was all about the people. And you kind of realize this is the last time that this group of guys is going to be together. And look what we accomplished this year, And so at that point, we just kind of enjoyed the last couple hours together.
I really did think, you mentioned this earlier, I really did think that, I don't know if team of destiny is the right way to put it, but I just thought we had the mix. And by the way, we didn't even mention spring training that year started with Darvish getting hurt and having Tommy John.
That's right.
But it was a fun year, man. I know it didn't end the way anyone wanted, but I will always look back at that year with a lot of joy and a lot of positive memories. And I imagine for you, given the personal success, there's that, but even, and we had talked about it before, you finding out about your father that year, it was, probably like, hitting you from all angles and just a memorable year for better in a lot of ways, but, not so much in others. But I appreciate you helping to kind of rehash that season, because that to me is, like I said, pretty special year.
Absolutely, man. It was a special year. It's pretty cool first year for you to be involved in that capacity. So a lot of memories there. Is that probably the most memorable year of my not just baseball career, but maybe my life. So I'll always look back on it and with a lot of fond memories for sure.
Well, Shawn and I are going to do this more regularly next year. It was initially in the plans this year. Some things got in the way of that, but we're also, this isn't going to be the last video we do here this year. So we'll maybe do some more look backs. But if you have any follow-up questions, maybe you're listening, you want Shawn to answer stuff about 2015, maybe we'll have like I don't watch The Bachelor, but they always do those like post show episodes, or they
After the Rose, Jared.
Oh, my bad. Okay,
After
we'll do our own After the Rose if you have any questions. But hopefully you enjoyed this. I know I did. It was awesome hearing Shawn's recollections of 2015. Shawn, appreciate it, man. I'm looking forward to doing something like this soon.
Thanks, buddy.